In the heart of Springfield, Massachusetts, nestled between an abandoned millinery and a three-story tenement, sat the solitary office of Amos Clark, private investigator. Its heavy oak door, bleached by the sun, bore a dusty sign that bore his name, the lettering in faded gold giving the only hint of his chosen profession. Inside, the room was an archive of mysteries, a bibliotheca of unfinished stories, and an echo chamber of secrets past. The muted glow from a solitary desk lamp lent a sense of warmth to the otherwise cold and methodical place. Each corner held an unspoken narrative, with piles of yellowing papers and forgotten photographs whispering tales of hidden truths and unanswered questions. Amos himself was a figure born of resilience and empathy. He was a man of medium build, graced with a charming, easy smile and a disarming demeanor that belied the tormented history etched in the creases of his eyes. His soul carried the weight of a childhood steeped in psychological torment, a crucible that had shaped his relentless pursuit for truth. With deft hands, he picked up a sepia photograph from a disorderly pile on his desk. The image portrayed an old stone building adorned with ivy, the Springfield orphanage, children frozen mid-play in its courtyard. An aura of innocence surrounded the establishment, a deception that intrigued him. The gentle air of childhood mirth seemed incongruous, disconnected from the disturbing reports of unexplained disappearances. Springfield Orphanage, huh? He muttered to himself, tracing the image with a thoughtful finger. What secrets do you hold in your stony bosom? His contemplation was interrupted by a sudden, jarring knock on the door. The unexpected visitor was an old woman, Mrs. Thorne, the matronly figurehead of the Springfield Orphanage. Her cordial exterior was marred by worried lines crisscrossing her forehead. "My dear Amos," she pleaded, her voice quivering like an autumn leaf. "It's the children. They've been disappearing one by one." Amos studied her, his gaze piercing. "What can you tell me, Mrs. Thorne?" With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, she recounted her tale. She spoke of children vanishing in the middle of the night, leaving behind emptied beds and untouched belongings, the only testament to their existence. As the sun set and their conversation drew to a close, Amos sat quietly in his chair, the weight of the impending investigation pressing down on him. A sense of dread coiled around his heart, like a serpent preparing to strike. The innocence of the photograph now seemed to be a cruel jest, the mirthful faces of the children morphing into silent screams in the face of the growing darkness. An abyss of mystery was opening up before him, ready to swallow him whole. Unperturbed, he leaned back, the specter of his past reminding him that it was within the darkest corners of existence that truth was often found. As Mrs. Thorne left, he peered once more at the photograph, his eyes echoing the same unspoken question. What secrets did the orphanage hold? He was about to delve into a reality that he could never have prepared for. The first chapter of his ordeal had begun, ready to spiral into a tale of unfathomable horror. The sun had barely crested over the hazy horizon as Amos found himself standing before the imposing stone structure of Springfield Orphanage. It was a sanctuary perched on the precipice of the unexplained, cloaked in a preternatural calm that belied the disquieting tales of its missing children. The building was a faded icon of yesteryears, its stone facade weather-beaten and overgrown with ivy that swayed in the wind like specters from the past. He could almost hear the stone walls whispering their secrets, veiled beneath an age-old coat of moss and history. The orphanage was no longer a beacon of hope. Instead, it had metamorphosed into a shrouded sanctuary, its shadows brimming with untold stories and unvoiced fears. His eyes met with the wary gaze of children who peeked out from behind the ivy-veiled walls, their innocence supplanted by a strange resignation. The eerie stillness, punctuated by the occasional rustle of the wind or the distant sound of a child's stifled sob, weighed heavily in the air. Every rustling leaf, every hastily withdrawn glance, seemed part of a sinister symphony, resonating with the tremors of an unseen horror. On meeting the caretakers, he was met with polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes and responses that danced on the edge of rehearsed. "We're as baffled as anyone, Mr. Clark," offered the head caretaker, a gaunt figure with pallid skin and sunken eyes. "The children just vanish. He was led to the abandoned chapel, a forsaken structure on the orphanage's grounds, its once sacred confines now holding an air of desolation and decay. Yet despite its isolation, the chapel seemed to pulse with a spectral energy, a presence more felt than seen. "Why is the chapel abandoned?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if fearing to disturb the spectral stillness. "There were incidents, Mr. Clark," the caretaker responded, his voice a mix of hesitation and fear. "The children were frightened. We thought it best to leave it be." In the quiet confines of his temporary quarters within the orphanage, he mulled over the day's discoveries. Cryptic drawings unearthed from the children's quarters, crude representations of a midnight procession towards the chapel, disquieting symbols and ominous figures played on his mind. By the light of a solitary candle, he traced the symbols with his finger, his face a tableau of determination and dread. Each drawing, each enigmatic symbol, served as a macabre clue, pulling him deeper into the labyrinthine mystery that shrouded the orphanage. As the echoes of the day receded into the folds of the night, he found himself grappling with the enigma of the Springfield orphanage. There was an unspoken darkness lurking beneath its outward calm, an undercurrent of fear masked by forced smiles and hushed whispers. The sanctuary was shrouded, its secrets tightly bound, ready to unfurl as he ventured deeper into the heart of its mystery. A new day was on the horizon, bringing with it the promise of chilling revelations and disturbing truths. The path to the shadows in the soil was drawing ever closer, inviting him to unravel the labyrinthine enigma that hid beneath the shrouded sanctuary. The pallid light of dawn found Amos Clark, his mind still preoccupied with the cryptic images unearthed the previous day. As the mysteries that lurked in the shadows of the Springfield orphanage started revealing themselves, he felt a familiar chill settle in the pit of his stomach, the same that he'd felt when he first delved into the secrets hidden in the darkness of humanity. As days morphed into nights and nights back into days, he found himself ensnared in a grotesque dance with the unseen. Disturbing dreams began to populate his slumber, suffused with haunting imagery and cryptic symbolism. Every closed-eye journey ended with a procession of uniformed children, their innocence lost, marching towards the abandoned chapel in the dead of the night. In the throes of the waking world, he began to see a dark pattern emerge. The polite veneer of the caretakers, their mechanical routines, and the uncanny uniformity of the children's behavior now appeared as pieces of a malevolent puzzle. Their singular aversion to discuss the midnight processions, the hastily discarded attempts at drawing the chapel, and the abandoned structure's spectral energy, it all began to coalesce into a grim tableau. "Tell me about the processions," he implored one of the older children, a boy with bright, fear-haunted eyes. The question was met with a deafening silence, a silence that seemed to echo the wordless terror hidden deep within the boy's heart. He spent a fortnight immersed in this cryptic realm, his instincts heightened, his senses attuned to the undercurrents of dread that ran like a tenebrous river beneath the orphanage's routines. As the puzzle pieces fell into place, the shadows in the soil were gradually taking shape, morphing into a nightmarish reality that sent icy tendrils of dread snaking down his spine. In the dead of one such night, plagued by insomnia and the urge to find answers, he found himself outside the abandoned chapel. The nocturnal serenade of the crickets seemed to dim as he approached the forsaken structure, as though the natural world recoiled from its unspoken horror. Summoning his courage, he pushed open the door. The chapel was desolate, the remnants of forgotten prayers and faded frescoes adorning the ancient walls. The air was heavy with an energy that seemed as ancient as time itself. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of movement. He turned, and there in the moonlit chapel, he saw them. A procession of hooded figures slowly traversed the nave, their silhouettes bathed in an ethereal glow. His heart pounded in his chest as he recognized the uniformed children, their faces blank, led by the gaunt figure of the head caretaker. As the procession moved deeper into the chapel, a hidden passage opened, leading to a clandestine realm beneath the orphanage. Retreating into the shadows, his mind reeled. The shadows had taken form, and they were more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. The next step of his journey into the heart of this cosmic horror beckoned, drawing him towards the yawning mouth of madness. The soil had bared its shadows, and it was time to face them in all their ghastly truth. As the thin veil of dawn draped itself over Springfield, Amos found himself standing before the yawning mouth of madness, his sanity teetering on the precipice of the known and the unfathomable. The night's revelation had left him disoriented. The reality of the orphanage's darkness, now a grim specter that had stepped into the harsh light of truth. Haunted by the ghostly procession in the open passage, he found his reality slowly unraveling. His dreams, once home to simple nightmares, had become a stage for unholy visions that echoed the disquieting ceremonies beneath the chapel. Every waking moment was consumed by a gnawing dread, as though the very earth under the orphanage thrummed with a grotesque pulse of its own. He sought to confront the gaunt caretaker, only to find himself rebuffed by walls of polite denial. His inquiries, met with dismissive glances and vague excuses, served only to stoke the inferno of his disquiet. He was now a stranger in a world teetering on the rim of the extraordinary, ensnared in the grasp of a horror that could barely be conceived, let alone understood. One evening, under the wane of the crescent moon, he found himself drawn to the abandoned chapel. The spectral energy, once a foreboding presence, now felt like a chilling invitation. Compelled by a desperate need for answers and an unsettling pull toward madness, he followed the path of the midnight procession into the heart of the concealed sanctum. There he stumbled upon the ghastly reality of the orphanage. It was a cavernous world beneath the innocuous chapel, a realm that hummed with unspeakable rituals. The shadows, once mere specters of his imagination, took form as a congregation of men and women clad in grotesque masks, their bodies moving in a disturbing rhythm around a monstrous figure. The children, led by the head caretaker, watched in an entranced silence, their innocence long lost to the spectacle of horror before them. His mind teetered on the brink of comprehension as he witnessed the congregation's morbid feast, a perverse communion that defied all known laws of nature. The smell of ancient soil mixed with the coppery tang of blood filled the air, and the echoes of their haunting incantations reverberated within his very soul. As his world shattered, he fled from the unholy sanctuary, his heart pounding against his ribcage, his mind in turmoil. He sought solace in the silence of his quarters, the unearthly sights and sounds of the hidden world beneath the chapel burning into his mind like scorching embers. He was drowning in a sea of madness, its waves carrying him further away from the reality he knew. Yet within this madness, a perverse clarity was taking root. The orphanage was more than it seemed, its foundations rooted in cosmic horrors that extended beyond the bounds of human understanding. As he faced the maw of madness, the final chapter of his journey loomed before him, its horrors no longer lurking in the shadows, but staring at him with pitiless eyes. The world had turned into a bleak symphony of horrors for Amos Clark. The Springfield orphanage, a once benign enigma, now stood as a monument to the unfathomable, its horrors embedded deep within the bowels of the earth. As he plunged further into the abyss of the unknown, the tether to his sanity frayed, snapped, and vanished like smoke in the wind. Days blurred into nights and weeks into a timeless expanse of dread. The unfathomable reality of the orphanage consumed his thoughts and dreams. His once lively eyes mirrored the desolate landscape of his mind, now a realm rife with grotesque images and abominable truths. Yet amidst the mental turmoil and ghastly revelations, a perverse transformation had begun to take root within him. The horrors he once sought to expose had started to lure him in with a morbid fascination. He was no longer merely an observer standing on the precipice of madness. He was slowly becoming a participant in this cosmic dance of terror. His nights were filled with restless pacing, his mind relentlessly pulled toward the subterranean chapel. The phantom procession replayed itself endlessly in his mind's eye. An eerie carnival of innocence led to their sacrificial communion. The disturbing images played out like a grotesque melody, in rhythm with the monstrous pulse beneath the orphanage. One such night, drawn in by the relentless call of the abyss, he found himself once again before the clandestine passage beneath the chapel. His heart echoed the rhythm of the macabre spectacle, the spectral energy of the unholy sanctuary humming in his veins. With trembling hands, he donned the grotesque mask, a vestige of the cannibalistic communion he had pilfered from the sanctum. His reflection, once a comforting emblem of his humanity, was now a foreign visage staring back at him from the grimy mirror of his quarters. The kind, open-minded investigator was no more. He was now a player in the grand cosmic horror that lay beneath the Springfield orphanage. In the cavernous depths beneath the chapel, amidst the congregation, he stood, not as an interloper, but a willing participant. His senses were overwhelmed by the cacophony of chants, the metallic scent of blood, and the sight of the monstrous figure, a once nightmarish image, now a symbol of his terrifying ascension. His transformation was complete. The man who had ventured into Springfield to expose the orphanage's horrors had succumbed to the abyss. His journey had led him here, to the heart of a cosmic horror, his once vibrant humanity swallowed by the abyss of the otherworldly. The shadows in the soil had swallowed the investigator, and in his place, a creature of the abyss stood. His last vestiges of sanity evaporated into the ether, consumed by the maw of madness and replaced by an insatiable thirst for the dark power that now claimed him. In the gruesome tableau of the Springfield orphanage, Amos Clark had not just found the truth, but had become it. The cosmic horror had claimed another victim, its monstrous symphony echoing through the labyrinthine chambers of the chapel, a timeless testament to the insidious allure of the abyss. We appreciate you tuning in. If you fancied the content, show your support with a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to keep up with our eerie adventures. Eldritch Tales Factory has plenty more to offer. Until next time.